Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. I arrived at the local hospital emergency room, knowing that my symptoms were indicative of congestive heart failure. After performing an ECG, I was transferred to a hospital equipped to perform coronary bypass surgery. Immediately after being anesthetized, I remember looking down from my position near the ceiling as a surgeon operated on me. "We'll need to make it a 4-way bypass since this other one is about 85% blocked," I heard the surgeon say to the other staff assisting him. As I listened to his evaluation, I began to feel a strange sensation in the back of my head, and without knowing how, I sensed that there was something wrong with the functioning of my brain in that area. Looking upward, I saw what appeared to be a male being who emanated infinite love and concern for me. The man, nearly 5 feet in stature, wore a white coat, trousers, and shirt, finished with a white necktie. His hair was also white, and he had a lightly tanned complexion. His eyes were the bluest blue I've ever seen. The being looked to be about 45 years old with a healthy and trim physique. I also noticed another version of myself standing behind the man in white. I also regarded a second version of myself as someone standing 8 feet before the man dressed in white. "You have a choice. You can come home with me, or you can return to your body. What do you want to do?" the being in white asked the version of myself standing before him. In that surreal experience, which seemed to occur outside of time, I looked upon the other version of myself behind the being in white while observing a third version of myself watching my body being operated on. As I gazed at my body on the operating table, it occurred to me that it would never be the same due to the thrombotic stroke I suffered during the operation. As I lamented, I felt an extremely powerful, loving force calling me to return home to the higher realm. Observing the version of myself standing behind a second light being, I could hear another version of myself wondering about the choice that the other version was about to make. It was then that I saw the version of myself standing before the being in white, looking down at my body on the operating table while thinking about my wife. "There are still things that I would like to experience in that physical body on Earth, so I choose to stay here," I heard one version of myself say. Suddenly, I was back in my body, opening my eyes in a hospital room. "He's awake now," I heard my wife say as she stood by the bed. I realized, as I tested my mobility, that I wasn't easily able to move the limbs on the right side of my body. After examining me over the following days, a neurologist explained that blockages in the blood vessels located in the posterior brain and in regions responsible for motor movement were the cause of the paralysis. After weeks of physical therapy, however, I was able to walk haltingly around again for short periods with only a slight limp. Weeks later, when it was time to leave the hospital, I was still wondering about all that I had experienced during my out-of-body experience. I did have some understanding concerning spiritual matters, but I had never studied the subject of near-death experiences. Subsequent to my NDE, I learned about the existence of a light being known as the spiritual greeter, a being who escorts the oversoul or higher being to their home in the higher realm. As I read about them, it occurred to me that the man dressed in white, with whom I was communicating during my NDE, was one such being, and I learned that the purpose of the greeter is to help the oversoul adjust to life in the spirit body. I also learned that there are predetermined moments in a person's life when they are given the choice to either return home or continue living in the physical body. As I reflected on all that occurred during my NDE, I deduced that it was my fifth dimensional, or higher self, looking down upon my third dimensional body on the operating table, while an even higher aspect of my consciousness, perhaps 10th or 15th dimensional, was contemplating whether my fifth dimensional self would choose to return home or remain in the corporeal experience on Earth. Since my NDE, I have come to understand that living multidimensionally means being aware that one consciously exists in multiple dimensions of consciousness simultaneously. As a hypnotherapist, I decided to use hypnosis as a method to verify the conclusions I had intuitively arrived at concerning the spirit, greeter beings, and predetermination by directing questions to my higher self, Sonnet, as he preferred to be addressed. "Sonnet, did my heart stop during the operation?" I asked during my first session. "Indeed, it did for a little while. Your heart stopped, but the physician felt he was in control of the situation and wasn't concerned because he was confident he could make it beat again. The body can continue to function even if the heart has stopped, as long as it is cared for and receives oxygen. With such care, it can maintain what you consider life for a short time without the heart. Your surgeon was aware that it had stopped and was able to get it beating again quickly. To restart it, he used pressure, not a jolt, but a strong physical squeeze that triggered the heart to move again," Sonnet explained. "Was it during that time when my heart stopped that I experienced my NDE?" I asked. "Yes. Both Archangel Michael and I were letting you know that you would soon reach a point where you would be given a choice. We wanted you to understand that while your brain had suffered, it was not beyond repair, and your soul would have the choice to remain with or leave your physical body, Sonnet explained. You think of such experiences as out of body, but truly, it is a place you can go to at any point once you gain that control. You were there because you were at a juncture, so to speak, a point of choice, Sonnet explained. During the NDE, I remember becoming aware of a being who looked to be physical, who appeared as a man, and who appeared to be dressed in white. Was I imagining that person, or was he really there? Who was he? I asked. He was there to accompany you if you chose to leave your body behind. He is someone you know on the other side, one who has volunteered to assist you in the past when you left the physical body, and he will return when you decide to move on. You may think of him as a tour guide or a way shower. He is there, waiting and observing on the other side, providing assistance to many souls and facilitating their transitions. This role is his specialty. As you make the transition, he is there to hold your hand and guide you forward without fear. He was dressed in white as a comfort to you, as that garb triggers a positive soul memory for you, Sonnet explained. During that out-of-body experience, the being in white asked me if I wanted to return to my body or return home with him. Is the same choice given to everyone in the process of transitioning between worlds, or only to those whose physical bodies can be returned to? I asked. There are those for whom the body has essentially been lost, those whose bodies have been damaged or have aged to the point of being beyond repair. These individuals aren't given the choice that you were given during your NDE. For them, there is no choice but to move on. However, if your body can sustain you longer and you wish to return to do further work, you are given the choice to return to the body or to go home, Sonnet explained. During the OBE, I was aware that I was standing behind and to the left of the greeter being. Behind him, I observed another version of myself looking down at my body. What part of my consciousness was standing behind the greeter, observing me on the operating table? I asked Sonnet. You have been introduced to what is meant by multidimensionality, or the ability to observe from many different perspectives. Those multiple instances of you represent the various levels, aspects, and perspectives of consciousness. The part of you that was watching the body closely is the aspect of your soul essence that is deeply embedded in the physical body and is used to maintain, control, and inhabit that body. It is that part of consciousness that simply observes and is not part of the physical. It was this aspect of self that was communicating with the being you call the greeter, the one you refer to as your higher self, and the one you find yourself speaking with right now, Sonnet explained. So it was you who was speaking with the greeter? I asked. Yes. It was, in fact, Michael and I, because, as your guide, Michael is always present and available. At that moment of crisis, Michael was very close to you, and I was with him. At an even higher level than your higher self is your soul essence, that aspect of self recognized by energy signature or vibration. This is the aspect of self that represents the highest consciousness part of you. It is the aspect you most deeply identify with when you reflect upon yourself or refer to yourself. Your soul essence, in fact, extends into Sonnet, who is represented in physicality as David, Sonnet explained. I see my body as a third-dimensional aspect of self, whereas I see you as my fifth-dimensional self. However, at an even higher level, there is a seventh or eighth-dimensional self. Am I correct in thinking that? I asked. Yes, that is exactly how it is. You mentioned earlier the aspects of self as experiencing life from a multifarious dimensionality vantage point. With that in mind, it is easy to understand from the highest perspective of your consciousness, which you refer to as the soul or your essence, that it can represent itself in more than one dimension of consciousness and simultaneously access multiple dimensions as it learns, grows, and gains a deeper understanding of those dimensions. You understand that consciousness can vibrate at increasingly higher energy states, granting access to information that, from your perspective, is considered to be higher dimensions. It can be deduced that it isn't so much a step-by-step process but rather the outward expansion of waves of energy, Sonnet explained. I am you, so I believe that what I experienced was in fact a near-death experience. Is that correct? I asked Sonnet. Yes, it was more than just an out-of-body experience you had. The choice at that point that you were given was whether or not to transition, so the experience is described as a near-death experience when you choose not to transition, he explained. I've heard some describe what I experienced as being at an exit point. Were those exit points chosen by my higher self or my soul essence before I incarnated on Earth? I asked Sonnet. In general, yes, there is a belief that our entire lives are predetermined by our souls, but it is more accurate to say that the circumstances of each particular life are chosen to be most fitting for the soul to learn its intended lessons. There are times when dying at a young age is orchestrated beforehand to serve as one of those lessons. However, choices can be made as life nears its end, when the body begins to fail. In such circumstances, The soul may choose to transition out of the body, but regardless, it is a choice based on its comfort level with all that it has learned thus far. In these cases, a choice may be presented, but not all souls are given one. Some experience what is often regarded as unplanned death, but what they may not be aware of is that their essence had planned the circumstances of their death before the event took place, Sonnet explained. Yes, I recall during the OBE thinking that it will be very curious to see what he, my higher self, chooses, I replied. Yes, he is a perspective of your core being or essence, so to speak. You are given opportunities and have the free will to make a choice, and once you make that choice, your essence will guide you forward from there, he explained. And I chose to return because I felt there was something I still needed to do, I asked Sonnet. Yes, and you are doing it, David. Do not doubt that, Sonnet replied. Thank you, Sonnet. There is another aspect of that experience that I'd like to explore. Higher self of the channel, I'd like you to call Michael to come forward, I said. He is here, and it is him, my higher self replied. Thank you for coming. I was pleased but surprised that you were there also, observing my near-death experience, and I'm curious about the role you had to play, I said. I performed what Sonnet was not able or capable of doing. It was more that Sonnet and I were there to observe you as you moved through that event in your life and made your choice. We were available to you, regardless of what you decided. We both offered our strength and comfort through soul energy to help you rise above, observe, and remain calm as you made your choice. We were not there to influence your decision, we were there to make you aware that the choice was yours to make. I am always with you, David, and I am always observing you. I come directly to communicate with you when you ask, but I am always there, observing, Michael explained. I would like to end my account by saying to you, the listener, that during my NDE it is quite apparent that I exercised my free will choice and elected to extend my contract and return to my earthly life for some reason. I have since reflected on what that reason could be, and since the central theme of my life has been about communication in one form or another, I have concluded that my life purpose for returning is to inform others of the many great benefits and methods of establishing conscious communication in a conversational dialogue with the higher dimensions. As more and more people begin to recognize that they are an integral part of the collective consciousness of humanity, hopefully our interpersonal communications will begin to emphasize and support our common abilities and strengths, rather than our perceived differences and assumed limitations. Such a change would indeed herald the beginning of wisdom, on both an individual level and on the level of the humankind collective.